very much, Johnny. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I will try to stay in this area, if you're okay with that.
Yep.
I have a tendency to wander around, so you can do the signal on the back.
No, I can move around as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Stress is an interesting topic. Maybe before I get into that, I got to hand it to you. This is a beautiful place to have a workshop meeting. It's away from the madness that you experience on a day-to-day business. The scenery is fantastic. I hope you had a chance to enjoy some of the park last night. Ruby's Inn has happened to be one of my policyholders also, so I'm out here quite often working with Ron Harris. And whenever I'm out here, I try to get a hike in or something kind of fun just to kind of relax and de-stress, I guess, so to speak. So this is a great place to have a workshop. I hope you had that opportunity last night to do a hike or stand out in the darkness and just look at the stars. I think that's pretty awesome. So, stress is an interesting topic, and one because it affects each one of us. Okay, we all have some degree of stress in our lives, and we're going to talk about what that is and how you may be able to manage it. But we also have people who work for us, and sometimes understanding what's going on in their lives or stress in their lives can impact their work. So as I go through this, it's very easy to think about yourself as I've talked about stress, but think a little more globally, I think, and you will get more appreciation out of this. I first became interested in stress about 6 years ago. I worked for an international mining company, and we would typically have a workshop similar to this for all of our safety and health professionals. We had probably 80 to 100 safety people globally throughout the world. And we would meet some corner of the world and talk about safety and health. And we met in LA one time, we met in Santiago de Chile, Peru, and then when I first met this lady, Eloise Blas, in Toronto, Canada, she gave a presentation on stress that kind of opened my eyes and ears to help me to realize that it's a major impact in the mining business at that time. And so I've since used some of her work, and I've added to it. I've done a little more research. I've added some surveys to it, which you'll participate here today. And so I've kind of broadened it a little bit more to make it more reaching to everyone. So that's kind of how all this began. Let's see, I guess I need to turn this on. Found out. Okay. So to begin with, I think we need to get on the same page to help understand what is stress. So I gave you Webster's dictionary definition here. It's the mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And I find this kind of interesting. When we talk about emotional strain, when we talk about strains, what do we usually think about? Muscles. Yeah. We have people who work for us all the time. Even us, we've always, all of us in here, strained a muscle or felt some tightness where we overstretch something. But see, we're talking here more about the mental, emotional strain. So it's a little different way to look at it, but it's the same way that we can hurt our bodies by getting this kind of a strain to our emotional psyche. Demanding circumstances. I can guess that a demanding circumstance is different for everyone in this room. What may be demanding for me, stand up here and talk in front of you, may be very easy for some of you to get up here and talk all day. Opposed to someone maybe who doesn't like to drive. I have a niece, she's 21, she hates to drive. That's a demanding thing for her, whereas for us it's very easy to drive. So it varies from person to person what is demanding and what causes us stress. So what is stress? Well, it's a normal part of life. There's nothing to be afraid of. We're going to experience it whether we like it or not. We've been experiencing stress since we were babies. A baby is stressed. When it's hungry, what does it do? It cries. When it's tired, it wants to cry. It has a bad diaper, it cries. Sometimes I want to cry. But I'm not a baby, so I can't cry. So it's a part of normal life. At times, it's very useful in our lives because it can help us, it can motivate us to do something, get outside of our comfort zone, go do something, run a last mile, something like that. And then at times, it can interfere with our job, our family, and even our health. And that's kind of what we're going to focus a little bit on today, is understanding that a little better. Surveys show that 50% of Americans say they fight when they're stressed with their loved ones or family members. And I'm a statistic. I remember, not in my early days of my marriage with my wife, but when my children were growing up, teenagers, there were times, and of course I'm in my career mode of trying to bring dollars in so we can pay for things and have a life. There were stressful times in our home. And I know things I said to my wife at times, I know I wish I hadn't said. I apologize at times, but we all do that when we become stressed. 70% say they experience real physical or emotional symptoms from stress. So everyone has different stress triggers, as I mentioned. We have those certain circumstances, and we're going to talk about this a little more a little later on to maybe help you understand what are some of your triggers. You may be aware of some, you may not be aware at all of some. It's interesting that work is the top of the list. Does anybody find that surprising? Our work. You know, we work probably a third of our life. I always say, we work a third, sleep a third, and then we get a third. If we're lucky, some people work more than a third, so they tear into that sleep third and their own third. 40% of U.S. workers admit to experience office stress, and 1/4 say that it's the biggest source of stress in their lives. So here's some of the causes for stress. And you know, you may relate to some of these, some of these you may not. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Being unhappy in your job, which we'll tolerate. I go back, I remember in my early life, I moved from Salt Lake City to Gainesville, Florida to work for General Electric. And I was excited to go to this new company. When I got there, it wasn't what I expected. And I worked 3 or 4 years, and I made the best of it, so to speak. But I wasn't really happy. You know, the whole time I was just kind of waiting to change, to do something else. So you can find yourself in that mode. Obviously, no one here has this, a heavy workload, too much responsibility, or long working hours, right? You work in accounting. Fine. No, certainly you do. Certainly you do. And then when that's done, you go home and you've got family things going on. From sports activities, taking children places, your spouse wants you to do this, that, shopping, so we're always busy. Having poor management, unclear expectations of your work, you know, feeling you don't have any say in your decision making. And remember, it's easy to think about yourself here. Think about, again, those who may work around you. You know, looking for some of the signs and symptoms of stress in some people that work with you can be very critical for you to keep them on as an employee, keep them happy, keep them motivated, those kind of things. Working under dangerous conditions, I'm not sure if that maybe applies to some of you. Again, I worked in the mining industry for 30-some years, and there's some danger there. Being insecure about not being successful. I think times back in my college days before I started to work, I always wondered if I was ever going to be anything. And you have that time period where you just don't know if you're going to be successful or not. Certainly, maybe even as an elected official, you wonder sometimes, can I be successful? You know, I have a lot of people counting on me. Can I be successful in what I do? And then giving speeches when colleagues are over there. I always like to throw that up. Some life stresses that can impact us. You know, obviously, if you have a death in the family or a close member to you, making funeral arrangements or helping the family, all those things can add stress. And you may not think of it as stress, but it does. It does wear on you. A divorce, loss of a job, increased financial obligations. You know, if you have quite a bit of debt and you're in a financial tight situation with your family, again, that can cause worrying, where's the money going to come from? Are we going to pay for those bills, etc. Emotional problems, depression, anxiety, anger, guilt, low self-esteem, taking care of an elderly or sick member of the family. My wife and I took care of her mom. When she was 90, she moved in with us. And bless her heart, she was really pretty easy to take care of. At least I thought. My wife had all the work. My wife had to take care of her, shower her, change her. Those are things that really wore on my wife. And at times, I could tell she was quite stressed about the whole situation. And then, of course, traumatic type things, natural disasters, violence. Interesting enough, chronic illness or injury. You may have people in your organization who are chronically ill or who have been injured for long periods of time. This creates a lot of stress, whether they show it or not. People want to be productive in their lives, and when they can't be productive, it can add a lot of tension to them and to their families. So sometimes stress comes from inside rather than outside. I tell my wife this all the time. She is a worrier. And forgive me, I'm not being sexist here, but women worry more than men. Men, we don't typically worry about things. At least I don't. Maybe I'm being just me here. My wife worries about everything. She worries about my married children and their children. She worries about they're going to lose their cell phone so she can't get a hold of them. Just things that I go like, come on. But it's true. It's a reality. Some of the other things that I'll kind of close on this little section, fear and uncertainty. If you think about the world we live in right now, if you listen to the news or watch the news every day, what's going on? There's ISIS, there's terrorism, there's things going on in airports. There's people walking into movie theaters shooting people. There are natural catastrophes. They're all back in Louisiana, hurricanes, tornadoes. And although they are rare, that they would probably happen to one of us in here, don't you feel like sometimes like, wow, the world, all these things are happening, and when's that going to happen here in Utah? So those kind of things, whether we realize it or not, we're seeing it, and it could cause some fear and uncertainty to some people. Attitudes and perception, this is huge. And we're going to see a video at the very end of the day that's going to talk more about this. How you see the world, whether you see it as the cup is full or the cup is empty, can really make your life very happy or very unhappy. It's really that easy. There are stories of people who have been broken into their homes and they've lost their television. And they say, well, insurance will take care of that. I'll get them a TV. My life goes on. Brush it off. There are other people who worry, oh my gosh, I'm never going to see that TV again. It's gone. They're going to break into my house again. What are they going to do to my children next time they come into my home? They build up to so much of a fear, perception, that it can cause additional stress in their lives. Unrealistic expectations. We're not perfect. Nobody in here is perfect. We make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. But what happens if we're so perfected that if we do make a mistake, it just destroys us? There are people who just, everything has to be just right. And they worry a lot, I'm telling you. And then change. Change is inevitable. Nobody is really likes change, but it is part of our life, so it's best to understand change, and things are going to go that way. So just kind of a summary then, stress is different for different personalities, different situations. Like I say, some people just let stress roll off their back. They don't really get into worry about it. Others will worry themselves sick. So, what's your stress level? What's your stress level? In your packet, there is a one-page survey. It looks like this. It's called the Workplace Stress Survey. Do you have any thoughts or comments? I mean, you don't need to share your score or anything. The idea is just kind of give you a little taste of a survey and maybe an area that you can work on. Okay? All right. If you found that one somewhat interesting, there are lots of these types of survey online. You just Google stress survey. This is one of many. This one was focused on work. Kind of helps you determine your stress level and then how it affects different parts of your life. There's another one in your packet, so it's a little more length, and we're not going to do that one. But it's called the Stress Indicators Questionnaire, and it looks at more broad life type stress. And so maybe when you're in a quiet area, and if you're curious, you can go through that. It looks at these indicators. So your personal type indicators, your sleep indicators. We're talking about sleep. Someone in the back of the room there. Behavior indicators, emotional indicators, and some personal habits. So again, sometimes we don't really think that we have that kind of stress in our life or emotional strain. So maybe by looking at some of these questionnaires, just scoring yourself, you can get an idea if there's some areas that maybe you'll need to focus on. So, any questions or comments on either of those? And again, there's multiple surveys if you're interested. Okay. So let's get into the meat of this. Let's stop talking some chemistry. Who likes chemistry? Well, there are some hands. These haven't been anybody. Like, no, I hated that class. We're not going to get deep into chemistry. We're going to talk about some basic type neurotransmitters and some hormones and how they all function together. But the idea is we want to try to improve well-being, and I'm going to define what well-being is, and we want to improve performance. Okay? Those are the two main areas that we're going to focus on in the next maybe 20, 30 minutes. When we talk about well-being, we're talking about more than just health. People say, well, well-being, that's health. Well, yeah, it is, but it's composed of really these 6 pieces of the pie. Am I standing in your way, Ginger? Okay. We're talking about physical, emotional, social, intellectual, spiritual, and occupational. And I'm going to just kind of go through each one of those a little more so you kind of understand what they're about. So again, we're talking about well-being. We're talking about each slice of the pie. And there needs to be a balance of all these for us really to be in what we call good health or good well-being. The first one is physical. Typically, we feel that is we talk about fitness. What kind of fitness levels do we have? Do we like to run? Do we like to walk? Do we do things at all? Do we move? Do we sit a lot? Not sit a lot? We're talking about nutrition in this area, types of foods that we eat, and we're talking about medical self-care. Now, when I say medical self-care, it's phenomenal that we live in such a progressive country as the United States, and yet there's probably 30 to 35% of Americans don't have a clue of what their blood pressure is, what their pulse would be, what their cholesterol level is, what their body mass index is. They don't go see a doctor. They don't know. And so when we talk about medical self-care, you should know what those numbers are for you. We know right away that cardiovascular diseases and heart diseases are one of the leading killers of us, human beings. And so you're not knowing your numbers, you're putting yourself at a greater risk. So that's the physical part of the pie. The emotional, which is stress management, depression, and that's the piece of the pie that we're going to talk about the rest of this time period that I have. Okay. Social, we're social animals. We need to socialize. We need to have friends, whether it's in the community, whether it's in church, whether it's in the clubs we join, whether it's in family or relatives. We're a very social type of people. Intellectual means typically we just need to challenge ourselves with something, whether it's reading. My wife convinces me that reading Facebook is intellectual. I'll go with that, I guess. Career development, we always want to improve ourselves. Are we happy where we're at, or do we want to do better? That kind of thing. Spiritual, pretty much speaks for itself. You know, we want to be loved. We want to love other people. We want to believe in hope, and charity, and service to others. That's, again, part of our wellness. You need that in your life to be healthy. And finally, occupational. Again, we need to work. Working is part of our well-being. So those are that. Again, we're going to focus primarily on the emotional part. So when we look now from well-being to performance, this is kind of interesting. I have a continuum. In the bottom being arousal, where we're just kind of in a semi-stupor state, to the very top of that point where we're maybe overstimulated, where there's too much. So in that area, we look at things like this. And I think everyone in here maybe at some point in time in your life has experienced this, where you're so overwhelmed with things you're supposed to do or go or whatever, that we have verbal and physical clumsiness, we have a disconnection, we have anxiety. Again, we're just overwhelmed. We've had that. Then there's this area that's called the zone. And I like the zone. The zone is good. The zone is where we feel superhuman. We can multitask. We think faster than everybody. We can do multiple things at one time. We have lots of energy. Anyone ever experienced that? Besides me? Yeah? You can raise your hands, okay? Yeah, we all have a time. And that's really where we want to operate all the time. And then there's this bottom rung where we're flat, uninspired, we don't care. It's almost like in the morning when I wake up, this is kind of me in the morning. This is kind of my daily cycle, I think. I just don't feel like doing much. I don't have much energy. I don't want to think about anything. I just want to feed myself, I guess, is all I really want to do. And what we do then, our body then uses a chemical called adrenaline to help increase our arousal, help us move up that scale. Okay? So again, from being completely overwhelmed too much to being just flat and inspired, we want to try to operate in that middle area called the zone. I put a little slide here, and this is kind of shows the same thing. This shows performance on this side. So we're performing here. Across the bottom is stress. And same thing. When we're asleep, we're very low stress, very low performance. I think everyone agrees with that. As the day goes on, we become a little more alert. We operate in this optimal zone where we have decent performance, medium stress. Okay? And then to the far end, we have high stress, and we get this anxiety, disorganization, low performance. Okay? So again, we're striving to be in this range. And I'm going to give you a little formula or a prescription to help you find that area so that you can operate in it. I teach another seminar called Significant Injury and Fatality Prevention. And what we found out is that there are certain types of jobs that lead to serious injuries and fatalities. And those are the ones we try to prevent all the time. There are things called error precursors that are conditions that occur prior to one of those serious injuries or fatalities occurring. Okay? So what we've done here, I've developed a little chart that shows some of these precursors. And the top of the list, these are the most serious ones, and they go down in descending order. So for example, let's say you're given or you give a task for someone to do, and you tell them, hey, this has got to be done in a hurry. Okay, what we're saying here then, you're creating a condition where an individual could be seriously injured or even die. Okay, so you think about the type of activity you're doing, and all of a sudden now you put a header on it if you want them to hurry. Another thing is if the individual is unfamiliar with the task or the first time they've done it, you greatly raise the condition that an accident, serious accident, is going to occur. Okay, follow what I'm saying? So one of these, and this human nature one, happens to be stress. So if stress is brought into a job or task, it can greatly influence a person's ability to be successful in doing the task and not being hurt. What happens is, obviously, when we're stressed, we're not thinking clearly. We're thinking about, what happened at home. My wife got mad at me at home and kicked me out of the house. The kids didn't come in last night, and she's holding me accountable for it. Those type of things can carry over to the work area. Now a person's asked to do something, climb a ladder, or work on a roof, or work on an electrical device, and his mind and attention is not focused on that task. That's the condition we're talking about, a precursor. I want to point out that stress is one of those key conditions. So, as we talked about earlier, workplace stress can spill into personal life, personal things can happen into work. And these are some things that I guess I caution you to look for in people you work with. If you see people who are not focused on their task, or not able to complete a task, or irritable, okay, those are signs that there's some stress, there's something going on in their lives. And so those are opportunities for you maybe to pull them aside, talk to them, and get a better understanding of what's going on in their lives so that you can help them. Interesting fact, about 13 million work days lost in the U.S., this is in 2005 data, are due to stress, anxiety, depression. So almost a third of all workday illnesses have to do with depression, anxiety, and stress. We don't usually think about that. We usually think about injuries that people have. That's why they're off from work. And the other thing I want to point out here is the stress is considered to be an illness, not an injury. It's an illness, an occupational illness. It's become nowadays. Okay. So when you talk about stress, we're talking about that. Stress can be hidden trigger behind some various cardiovascular, musculoskeletal, depression, obesity, violence. It can lead to all kinds of other things too. So let's talk about the chemistry of the players that are involved. Here's the five, you either call them hormones or neurotransmitters that we're going to talk a little bit about. Adrenaline, cortisol, serotonin, melatonin, oxytocin. Any of these look familiar to you? Have you ever heard? One or two, I would think you've probably seen before. Which ones? Anyway. All of them? They all sound familiar? Oh, good. Good. Most people hear about adrenaline, epinephrine. Most people hear about either serotonin or melatonin. Melatonin is used to help us sleep. It's our natural sleep aid, if you will. Okay. So let's go through and talk about these individually. We're going to talk about adrenaline first. Adrenaline is the acute stress response. And when I say acute, I'm not meaning like, ooh, it's cute. What does acute mean? Anyone? Say it? Intense. Intense. Yeah, right now. It happens right away. It doesn't wait. That's what adrenaline does. It's actually produced by the adrenal glands, which are on the end of each of our kidneys. And so when adrenaline is needed by the system, the brain sends a signal to the adrenal glands, and boom, it happens. This is what happens. In fact, on television, there was yesterday, a a vehicle collision on the road, and there was a car on fire. Anybody watched the news last night? You were probably out walking out and watching the stars, right? There was a car on fire, and 3 good Samaritans went after this lady in the car and pulled her out before the car exploded. Well, they did that, one, because they're good Samaritans, but adrenaline kicked in. Boom, they were responsive, just like that. There are stories where people have lifted cars off of people who the car has fallen on. It's adrenaline. It happens really fast. How many of you have been in a situation where you're sitting nice and calm, and all of a sudden someone says, "Sir, we have you come up and tell us about your life story." All of a sudden, boom, you feel like heart going boom, 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 right? That's adrenaline. It happens just like that. That's what adrenaline does. And that's good. It's good and it's bad. So let's understand a little better why it's good and bad. Well, what happens is we get an immediate change in our heart rate and force of contraction. So our arteries and veins go up, heart pumps harder, we pump more blood to the body, we become flushed, we perspire, our hands get hot. All kinds of things happen to us when adrenaline kicks in. We have an increase in the blood cholesterol, blood's ability to clot, depositing of plaque, our respiratory rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, our mental awareness goes up, so there's one good thing maybe. The chance of producing cortisol, and we're going to talk about cortisol next, goes up. And then our urine production goes down. And I'll explain why that's important here in a second. Okay, so any questions about adrenaline? Can be good, can be bad. Most of the time adrenaline's good. It's what kind of gets us out of bed sometimes in the morning. It gets us on our feet, gets us to the breakfast table, or gets us to work. So adrenaline's good. What you're going to find is with we need to manage adrenaline. There's all kinds of things that create your adrenaline, so we're going to have to work on managing that. Okay, the other one we're going to talk about now is cortisol, and it's considered to be the chronic response. And again, we'll ask for a definition of what's chronic. Good, you've got it probably. Put you on the spot.
Ongoing.
Okay, ongoing, good definition. Chronic is ongoing, long-term. So what we find out is that if adrenaline works immediately, and if we have to keep adding adrenaline, what happens is cortisol then kicks in. Cortisol comes from the same place, from the adrenal glands, off the kidneys, but it has a longer lasting effect and has some, sometimes it's called public enemy number one. It would cause a lot of the health concerns that we experience. So what happens if we get too much cortisol is we have increased risk of weight gain, heart disease, diabetes, increased blood sugar at the expense of muscle protein, increases our appetite, which is not good, promotes truncal obesity, that's the little gut that we get, increases urine production, which equals blood volume, hypertension. So back to the urine production, depending on if we have too much or not enough urine or liquids in our body, it can create hypertension. That's why you hear doctors always say, drink a lot of liquids, drink a lot of liquids. It's good to have a lot of good blood volume, water volume in your system because it helps with your blood pressure, blood cholesterol, those kind of things. So always good to drink water. You can't drink too much water. Finally, there's an increase in the risk of osteoporosis, which has to do with bone health, increased risk of diseases, susceptibility to infection and diseases, and then there's a decrease in serotonin. So again, we have adrenaline. Too much adrenaline creates cortisol. Too much cortisol has some health effects, obviously. Not desirable thing that we want. Okay, so let's talk about serotonin. Serotonin is the third one we're going to talk about. And serotonin really is kind of the blissful blissful hormone. We need that to help us, it mellows us out. It's very mood altering. Low levels of serotonin are linked to anxiety and depression. In fact, people who take Prozac for depression, what happens is it prevents the reabsorption of serotonin. So it keeps more serotonin in the body, basically what it does. Serotonin is important for sleep. It's important, it regulates our appetite and our mood. And as we talked about earlier, cortisol suppresses that. So if we produce too much cortisol, then we're not getting enough serotonin in our system, which can cause various health issues. During the night, our brain breaks down the serotonin to create melatonin. So it's a precursor to melatonin. So with that, let's talk about melatonin. It starts when the lights go out at night. So if the lights don't go out at night, then there's no melatonin being produced. So the lights go out, we want to have a nice dark room. Your body starts breaking down the serotonin to melatonin, and that's what really helps us to sleep. I think you can buy melatonin. A lot of people buy that and use that as a sleep aid. It's pretty mild, and it's probably not as dramatic as some of the other sleep things like Ambien and what else is out there. I can't remember all the other more prescription-related sleep aids. So again, it's a little more milder form of it. Okay, so let's kind of look at how it all works together, and this, maybe I'll ask if you have any questions after I finish this discussion. So, again, we know that adrenaline improves performance. That's a fact. We also know that too much adrenaline increases cortisol. Too much cortisol increases our weight, increases our health. Okay, so you can see right away cortisol is a public enemy number one. And cortisol goes up, serotonin goes down. Serotonin then is what leads to melatonin. Melatonin leads to sleep, and sleep leads to improved performance. Sleep is good. Sleep is good. I know a lot of people like to avoid sleep. They're just too busy to sleep. But sleep is very important to your body health. See that little smiley face here? I improve performance. Any questions for that? How that follows? Okay, so it's very clear that we have three things we want to do. We want to manage adrenaline to improve performance. We want to avoid cortisol to maintain health and weight relationships. And then we want to maximize serotonin to improve our mood and lead to getting melatonin. Okay, does that make sense? So how do we do that? Well, let's talk about that. Manage adrenaline. Number one, plan a day. You know, there's nothing worse in your day than to come in the morning and you think you're going to do this, and all of a sudden you're doing that. We all do that, right? Or you've got a phone call you've got to make, but then you have a salesperson or a safety gal like me show up on your door. And you can't get what that is done. So to the best of your ability, try to plan your day. And this sounds pretty simple, but it's not easy, right? I think we all know that. Try to plan your day. APE is your adrenaline-producing events. And we'll talk about that here in a second, what those are. Don't let other people's urgencies run your life. I actually took a seminar one time that taught me how to say no to other people. Because I'll take on anything. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. You see, I've got so many things that are on my plate, I can't get anything done. So it's important to be able to say no, I can't do that because I've got these three other priorities. Let Joe do it. So learning to say no to other people's urgencies. Now, that's a tough one. It's tough to tell your boss that you can't do that. Control your thoughts. Stay positive. Again, we're going to talk about it at the very end of a little video. I think it'll talk about that. Learn to say no, let go. And then use adrenaline triggers sparingly. What do you think an adrenaline trigger is? Stimulants. Yeah, they're all around us. Chemical and non-chemical, right? In fact, let's talk about it. Caffeine. You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. I'm not saying not use caffeine, but try to control the amount you use. I think, I forgot all these statistics. I think like a decaffeinated cup of coffee has like 35 milligrams. I think a brewed cup of coffee has close to 200 milligrams a cup. Okay, so maybe a cup and a candy bar or something. Things like Red Bull, Monster, and Rockstar, what do you think they are? I feel like about they're in the 100, 200-300 milligrams. So what does that do? Well, yeah, it wakes you up and gets you going sometimes. But what's it really doing? It's putting adrenaline in your system, right? That's what it does. It stimulates adrenaline. And adrenaline, too much adrenaline leads to what? Cortisol, which, the whole going down here, right? So just control it. Probably a lot of you don't have an idea of how much caffeine you take. I didn't. I had to start counting sometimes to see how much caffeine I put in my system. Yeah, you'll be surprised. Nicotine also stimulates adrenaline. Being late. Oh gosh. Some people could be late fashionably and it doesn't really matter. Other people, if I'm a minute late, I'm worried. I was supposed to be there at 8:30. So being late can increase that adrenaline flowing, your heart rate. You know what I'm talking about there. Speeding. I love speeding. I do. It creates adrenaline in your system. And I'll tell you a quick little story. Our safety health group goes on a retreat every year. 2 years ago, we went to the Bonneville drag strip up in Salt Lake. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. They drag these nitro cars and race cars and whatnot. Our activity that day was to drag these sports cars, okay? And so we had a breakfast, lunch, and then we had, I think we had it two times down the strip just to kind of get ourselves through the car. And then we started challenging one another, okay? And you just race from a dead stop, the triple shoe would go, red, yellow, 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 green, and you just boom, as fast as you could down to the end. And then you go past the end, up on the throttle, you coast to a slow stop, brake, come back around and do it again. I think we did it about 6 or 7 times. And after doing that, and I had fun, I had a great time. I actually won it. I'm probably one of the older guys in the group. They couldn't figure that out. How did he do that? But I had real quick responses, anyways. But I'll be honest with you, it took me 24 hours to come down from that. My wife, she was ready to kick me out of the house. I was so excited. I had pictures. I had to tell everybody. I called people. It was so fun. So anyways, I can relate to this. Speeding does increase your adrenaline level. Interesting one too, any of you who work out. Exercising on an empty stomach is not good for you. Because what happens is you start exercising, your body's calling on, whoa, whoa, we need help here, we need help. And the next thing you know, you have adrenaline pumping in your system to keep you exercising, running, cycling, swimming, whatever you're doing. So it's always good to eat something. Put something in your stomach so your stomach starts calling on that food supply rather than triggering adrenaline. But we're not getting enough sleep triggers adrenaline. Why do you think that is?
You need the adrenaline to function.
You need the adrenaline to function, right? You need to drive to work. All of a sudden you've got phone calls and things, people coming asking you things. So your body's calling on that adrenaline, right? Very good. Okay, so the second thing is we want to avoid cortisol. We want to use adrenaline sparingly. We just said that. Avoid exercise first thing in the morning, empty stomach. Eat regularly. What does that mean, eat regularly? That means like, make sure I get 3 meals a day? Is that what it means? When you're hungry? Okay, let's get closer. Eat all the time. Eat all the time. What happens is we get up in the morning, and if we don't have breakfast, sometimes we have a little breakfast, we go to lunch, and what do? Eat a big lunch, right? And then we operate for a while, and then we come back down here, and now in the afternoon we don't eat, we don't do anything else, then we go home for dinner, and we go back up again. Do you think that's healthier than just eating a level balance of food all day? It's hard to do, but it can be done. And we're talking about apples, bananas, things you can just munch on during the day, a sandwich, half a sandwich in the mid-morning, you rest your sandwich for lunch. There's ways to do it. You just have to kind of figure out your lifestyle. But eat regularly, try to eat consistently. Finally, maximize serotonin. This is a good one. And this is an easy one. All you're required to do, you probably did a little bit this yesterday. Spend some time outside. Get some fresh air. Do a little exercise, a little low-intensity exercise. I think some people are on a hike. Maybe that didn't come across as low intensity to you, but that was good exercise. Those are things that produce serotonin, which help you to develop melatonin. Okay? If you have desk-type jobs, this becomes something you can do at lunchtime. Instead of sitting at your desk eating your sandwich or your soup, whatever, go for a little 5 to 10 minute walk. I got a story I'll tell you in a second about 5-minute light. And we talked about eat regular, balanced meals to keep blood sugar levels as optimal as possible. And then use only small hits of carbohydrates. And what I mean by this are things like candy bars and donuts, things like that. Sodas, what do they call them? Diet sodas, things like that. Those all have sugar in them and they have carbohydrates. So you want to just kind of be careful with those. You can use them, but just be careful. Sleep. Who has a regular routine they'd like to share with everybody? Come on, everybody has a routine. Come on, all you quiet group. Share with me your routine. It's okay. We're all friends here.
Bedtime routine?
Yeah. What do you do every night?
I'm going to sound like such a loser. Okay, so we put our kids to bed at like 8:30, and then my husband and I go to bed, and we watch TV for about an hour, and then I take off my glasses, and I'm sleeping by 9:30.
There's your routine.
Wow.
That's a routine.
5.
That's okay. The reason it's a routine is because you've got your body conditioned, so you know at about 9:30 the TV is going to go off, and your lights are going to go off, you're going to bed. You've already conditioned your body to do something to go to sleep. That's all it is. That's all routine is. It can be anything. Opposed to a non-routine is tonight you're going to bed at 10, and then the kids are going to come over and play cards till about 11. Tomorrow night I'm going to go to bed at 9. I mean, there's no routine. A routine, as silly as it sounds, is very important for getting the proper night's sleep. Because what you want to do, you want to try to go to bed before 10. That doesn't always happen, okay? Because we're all different, we have different responsibilities. You want to keep the room dark. You want to aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, okay? And that's easier to do if you have that routine. Because you know exactly how many hours you're going to go to sleep, right? That's a great routine, okay? Some of the effects of inadequate sleep, increased heart disease, decreased immune function, nothing good. Increased appetite, overeating, obesity, decreased performance, decreased the memory capacity to learn. So nutrition, obviously food is very important, what you put in your body. That's the fuel. I mean, if you put water in your gas tank in your car, what would the car do? Not much, right? It would struggle a little bit, right? Well, our bodies are no different. We don't think of it that way, but we're kind of a fine-tuned machine. We want to put good food in so you get maximized performance. So as we talked about earlier, the balanced meals, smaller portions, eating carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables. I was talking to a group at the table prior to this. I kind of changed my diet here about 7 or 8 months ago, where I focused mainly on fruits and vegetables. And it's remarkable what it's done, how I feel, and it's kind of changed me. So I know this works. Avoid processed, refined foods. You know, these are the In-N-Out burgers, the McDonald's French fries, the pastries and donuts. I mean, they're good. And I like to have one in there. But you know, if your life is focused around those, you might want to rethink. Use small amounts of simple carb. We talked about that. Eat less saturated food. Get some omega-3 fatty acids every day. So these are all ways that you can, again, improve your health and your nutrition. So here's an exercise prescription. How many in here exercise on a regular basis? Come on, be honest. Fantastic. Awesome. Very good. Exercise is very important. Here's kind of just a basic type of thing that if you're not exercising, here's a way to get started. Do some type of cardiovascular exercise 3 or 4 times a week. We recommend 30 minutes of, if you can, higher intensity. Remember, it burns that cortisol. So high intensity might be running or cycling and doing something more intense. But certainly some long and slow type exercise, that could be just walking for 30 minutes. Increases that serotonin level. And I gave this class to a truck driving operation I work with. And he told me, I can't do that. I don't have time in the day to do that. I said, okay. Now, about lunchtime sometime, just try it if you can. So about 6 months later, I ran into him, and he said, you know, I took your challenge, and I decided that every day at lunch I would walk 5 minutes. I said, good for you, good for you. So he'd walk 2.5 minutes out, 2.5 minutes back, and he'd go back to his work. He said, I did that for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. I thought, you know, I can probably do 10 minutes. So you can see this where I'm going with the story, right? So he's up to about 45 minutes now. He's been doing this for about 1.5 years, and he'll walk back. He since his son challenged him to do some weightlifting, so he's doing a little bit of weightlifting. But what I'm getting to is it's changed his life. He's about 65 pounds he's lost just by walking and doing some exercise. And so I call him 5 Minute Mike, because he started off his first couple of weeks just doing 5 minutes. And that's what any of us can do. Sometimes we just need to start. The other thing is resistance training. Again, 2 or 3 times a week, do some sets. You don't have to have a fancy set of weights. I know people who use a brick or use a can of beans. I mean, anything to get some resistance to your arms, your legs. You can be kind of creative. Again, there's all kinds of information out on the web, if you just Google it, or Bing it, wherever your browser is, on finding these kinds of training things to do. There's also YouTube videos that will take 3 to 5 minutes to show you how to do things. And then incorporate some kind of flexibility training. As our body gets older, we become less flexible. And so you want to be able to focus on your chest, your hamstrings, and your hip flexors. Those are areas typically, as we get older, they easily become injured and kind of hurt our ability to get around.
But how you think of
One over here, can you go ahead and take on who the spokesperson is?
When we talked about it, one of the things that didn't show in the presentation, but we went back on, was adrenaline gives you that fight or flight. And I think it depends on how you receive that and process it according to the video. If you're thinking flight every time you have an adrenaline reaction, that's going to be when the vessel's constrict and you're worried and you're scared. And a couple of us said, you know, presenting and doing things, we see it as a challenge, and so you get that elation afterwards. It's some of those other, and each of us have key indicators that still give us that flight thing. For me, I can do the council, I can do my county manager, I can talk to the public, but it's when the press calls. And I'm like, oh, because I know it's going to be on record, it's going to be, if I say something wrong. Another one, she said, is it Kaylee? Callie. She says I'm new, so I feel sometimes people come in and I might not have the right answer, so I'm feeling inadequate until I get up to that experience knowledge. And then we say, you know, we had a roads guy here, and he says, I've got so many tons of asphalt, and suddenly they say there's a water break, and you know, how do you get the asphalt taken so it's not a waste, and then you lose money while you still got to do the water break. So it's those things. Not always, you know, our job's not as stressful. It's some of those monkey wrenches that get thrown in, and how you react to that, and how you see it.
Unplanned events that we talked about that you try to control.
Yeah, and getting a way to keep those triggers from getting you all the way up the scale and looking at them as challenges, not as a flight situation.
Excellent. You know, one of the key things is identifying what those are. And you did, some of you have already kind of identified that. There are other things that trigger you. So give some thought, figure out what those are. Just knowing about them gives you the opportunity then to manage them.
Oh, and when the press calls, leaves me a message. I sit there, I meditate before I go on. Get the heart rate low, so I know that I'm a little more concise and review the facts before, instead of just grabbing the phone and returning the call. So
yeah, and maybe that's the way you handle it in the future. I mean, if they have a call saying, I can't talk now, can I call you back in 15 minutes? Then it gives you that time to meditate, get your heart rate down, get your thoughts together, and then call. Maybe that's how you just don't do it on the fly. Very good, thank you. Thank you, group. Very good. And then the other group over here. Someone want to share?
Yeah, some of the things that we talked about is learning to handle the stress. And one of the big things that she talked about was having that empathy or caring, finding those things to reach out and empathize, help others around you. Whether that's thinking about others as you're in your commute, or working with your kids once you get home, and that helps us de-stress and helps them, of course, also. The other thing that I thought was interesting, my wife a short while ago shared with me something that she found. She heard somewhere that the feeling of fear and stress is the same as courage, except for with the courage, then we remember to breathe. So the fear and stress is we forget to breathe. That adrenaline kicks in, and oh no, I'm going to forget to breathe.
The phone call for the press.
Exactly. But if you can learn to manage that, remember to breathe, then you can turn that into the courage and the happiness and that
very well put.
I can do this.
Very good. That's again that positive nature. Yeah, very good. Good. Does anyone have any burning thing that they'd like to share? I can ask those two groups to respond. If there's anything else, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity. Okay, let me do a quick summary and I'm done. Just a quick look at what things would look like. Again, controlling your day-to-day kind of stress. You want to eat breakfast, plan your day, your priorities, your goals, do some exercise, eat well. Eat smaller portions, more healthier types of foods. Use your adrenaline triggers sparingly, okay, or as needed. I gave you some ideas of what those are. Plan for enough sleep. Remember the routine, number of hours. Sit less, stand more, move more. Think positively about stress, as Kelly talked about. Stress gives us access to our heart. I thought that was a tremendous statement she made. I kind of made that my mantra. And then finally, take responsibility for your life. No one else is going to care about your life but you, so you have an opportunity to take that responsibility. With that, I'll leave you some beautiful pictures of Bryce Canyon. Any questions or comments?
Think positively, it's not just about stress, but about everything, healthy stress also.
Amen.